The Ellen Carrington Show is brought to you by Palm Tree Books, located in Tampa, Florida. Palm Tree accepts manuscript submissions directly from authors and literary agents, in addition to offering non-exclusive contracts and generous royalties on a quarterly basis. Visit the Palm Tree Books website at palmtreebooks.wordpress.com for more information. Palm Tree Books, where published authors are paid, not paying to get published. It's the Ellen Carrington Show on Spreaker Radio, with lively discussions on books, sports, current events, news, entertainment, lifestyles, the occasional guest, whatever. Nothing is off limits, so you'll never know what to expect. And good afternoon. It's another edition of the Ellen Carrington Show. Glad to have you all here. I have occasions when I like to clown around, take shots at people, discuss everything from books to sports to everyday life. But this particular episode, I'm going to touch on a couple of incidents that happened recently in my neighborhood. Hence the title of today's episode being called Too Close to Home. I'm sure many of you have heard by now about a tragic fire in McKeesport, PA, the morning of October 18th. At one point, it even trended on Facebook, and a lot of outside media covered this as well. The fire's location was just over the hill from my own residence, and the 4 children, 7-year-old Dominic Jordan, Autumn Jordan, who was 6 years old, Serenity Jacob, she was 3, Victoria Jordan was 2, and their mother was 27-year-old Hope Jordan. They all lost their lives in the fire, along with Hope's father-in-law, Ronald Engenloff Sr., and he was 55 years old, so very relatively young family. Very sad. But the fire's only survivor is Hope's husband. He is 23-year-old Keith Engelhoff. The couple were married not long ago, and Keith was caring for his father, Ronald Sr., who was disabled. Keith sustained burns over 55% of his body, part of the fire, and he remains in the Pittsburgh Hospital's burn unit. As far as I know, he's still alive, thank goodness. But aside from the 6 lost lives, there was no insurance on the home. The family had no life insurance policies. None of them did at all. And Keith currently lacks coverage for medical care. He doesn't remember much of what happened and has little idea of what lies ahead of him once he leaves the hospital. I cannot even begin to imagine both the physical and emotional pain this man is currently and will continue to endure once he's recovered. Losing one's entire family in a fire, plus having to deal with one's own critical injuries, isn't an easy feat for anyone, let alone a guy who's only 23 years old. I mean, that's a pretty relatively short life to have to deal with so much like that. From what I understand, he and his father were very close, and this is going to devastate him if it hasn't already. That's the only thing. But however, there is a bright spot among this tragedy. Friends, other family members, and even total strangers in surrounding communities, they all came together and began raising funds to ensure Ronald, Hope, and your children had proper burials. And their funerals were held this past Monday, which was November the 3rd. And from what I heard, Hunter Edmonds and Striffler's Funeral Home did an outstanding job, and the services were absolutely beautiful. So, great job, guys. Try to make it easier on the surviving family and friends. In addition, fundraising activities are continuing for Keith's medical expenses. A spaghetti dinner was held in Glassport, PA on November 2nd. That was this past Sunday. The GoFundMe site, opened by Amanda Grimes shortly after the fire, continues to accept donations. And so far, as of today's show, they have raised over $15,000. We've got a lot of generous folks out there, and I'd like to thank you on her behalf. I also put out a couple collection cans in the area where I live to help raise some money. They didn't gather millions of dollars, obviously, but I'm happy to say community generosity continues. And a little bit of respectable amount of money, you know. Even tons and tons of change. I had to go to the Coinstar machine and convert it to, regular money because it kind of weighed everything down. But anyway, thank you for those who donated to the can collections, and I'd like to thank a couple businesses, particularly the Unimart on Romine Avenue here in Portview, for letting me sit a can out for donations. I'm sure Keith and his family will appreciate that. Amanda Grimes has also passed on some information for an account accepting offline funds because, there are some folks that don't feel comfortable contributing to online sites like GoFundMe or anything else because, unfortunately, there are a lot of scam artists out there. But Amanda's not one of them, I'm happy to say. But anyway, they opened an account, I should say, at Huntington Bank in Glassport. And I'm going to post the bank's address and link to Amanda's GoFundMe page following today's episode if you wish to make a contribution toward Keith's ongoing medical care. And he's going to need a lot of it, so we need to band together and get this guy, what we can. And hopefully maybe get him some health insurance in the process. Many people we tend to complain when life deals us a bad hand. But I always say, no matter how dismal things can sometimes be for me, there's always going to be someone out there who has it far worse. And this fire and its aftermath are just, a couple examples of someone not battling one tragic challenge, but several. And for a man to eventually leave the hospital and discover losses of his home, the father he was close to, the wife he just married, not long ago, and those 4 children, it's going to be traumatic for him. But thanks to community generosity, Keith will have much support as possible, whether it be financial, emotional, physical, psychological. A lot of folks out there are pulling for him, and hopefully this will help him endure the transitions that lie ahead. I also ask today that prayers continue for Keith's recovery. He could certainly use them, and keep his family in mind too. And on that note, I'd like to move on to another topic of something too close to home. And we're talking really close. This literally happened several feet from my apartment this past Monday night. I remember hearing a loud bang while gathering up some trash to take to the dumpster, but I initially thought, new owners of a house being renovated next door, they were over there, banging around. You're doing house renovations, let's just say you're not going to be quiet about it. It's not a quiet process. But it was either that or someone up the alley goofing off, Yeah, we got kids around here. They're nice kids, but you're a teenager, you're going to act goofy and stuff. Come on, I know I did. So no one's immune to that. That's what I dismissed it as initially. But it turned out my neighbor living in the unit next to mine, he's right on the other side of me, he was disoriented, and what happened as a result, he hit his car's gas pedal instead of the brake when he pulled into the building parking lot out here. But he took out 2 bushes and slammed into the front of an empty apartment right on the end here. The good news is nobody got hurt. Although can't say the same for the apartment, it's trashed. But my neighbor is diabetic, and apparently he hadn't eaten for some time. And there's a possibility that he consumed a beer or 2 at the nearby Legion Hall. Now, I didn't smell any alcohol on him, so no one's really sure about that. So I'm not going to say, hey, a guy was drunk. Chances are good he's probably, he could have, had hypoglycemia and it disoriented him. Or it was the combination of the 2. The beer or diabetic problem, whatever. There's no clear-cut thing. But the building's insurance adjuster and management came yesterday morning to assess the apartment's damage and spoke to me and a few other neighbors. and the unit's loss is estimated to be at least around $30,000 to $50,000. Like I said, place is completely trashed. But here's the twist. If you see my neighbor's car, there's barely any front end damage. Now, figure that out. I am not kidding. No one can make this up. There, maybe he's got like a little dent on the right headlight of his car, and some paint is scratched off. That's it. Now, you look at that, there's no way you're going to think this guy hit the wrong pedal in his car and crashed into an apartment, knocking over, we're talking bricks, sidewall, glass, metal. Trash this to, damage in the thousands, the five-figure thousands. But yet there's barely scratches on his car. And praise the Lord, stranger things have happened. And, the police told my neighbor he's going to receive a letter from the state requiring to retake the driver's test. But I'm predicting that his chances of retaining a license could be slim to none. But, weird things, who knows, it could go the other way. And this maybe taught him a lesson to, hey, I got to take care of myself, no drinking beer while I haven't eaten, and I'm not going to go into apartment buildings anymore. But, things could be a lot worse. Gas and water lines to the building could have been broken. My neighbor could have been seriously hurt or killed. Thank God he was wearing a seatbelt, which I advise anyone to do, whether you're a driver, passenger, restrain your kids, whatever you have to do. This is one example of what can happen if, of saving a life. That could have saved him. That's probably why he didn't have a scratch on him. Although, how the car didn't get damaged very badly, it remains a mystery. But anyway, there could have been a fire started. Could put the other neighbors in danger. Or a power line knocked to the ground. But it's a good thing damaged empty unit was not yet rented. Apparently somebody was going to move in. And they changed their mind at the last minute. So maybe, I still say someone in the great beyond likes us or something, because this guy escapes without a scratch, does damage into 5 figures. By the way, he's not going to get evicted, thank God. I don't think. Management is not that mean. Now, if he just trashed the joint on purpose, that could have been another story, but this was an unfortunate accident. In any event, the moral of the story is this. If you have some type of medical condition that could compromise your alertness while driving, you need to take the appropriate preventive measures before getting behind that wheel. Take your medication, put on your glasses. If you're required to wear driving glasses, by all means, put them on. They're not helping you in your coat pocket or whatever. They belong on your nose. Make sure you get enough sleep, whatever. You've probably heard of truck drivers who've gone 24, 48 hours without sleep, and the terrible accidents that resulted as a result. And more importantly, and I cannot stress this too many times, do not drink and drive. Even if it's 1 or 2 beers, driving after alcohol consumption, it's not worth the risk of arrest. It's not worth getting your license taken away. It's not worth injuring or killing yourself, or God forbid, other innocent people. Take the precautions, people. You got to do this. If you don't do it for you, do it for your family, do it for other people out there. Common sense. If you have a seizure disorder, you recently had a seizure, don't get behind the wheel of a car. If you're diabetic, you haven't eaten for several hours, have a meal before you leave. So you don't be stepping on the wrong pedal in your car and running into buildings. That tends to happen a lot these days. And unfortunately, this was a little too close to home. But another thing, it's a good idea to take care of yourself, if nothing else. Be careful out there, operate the seats, drive defensively, no drinking. As a matter of fact, on that subject, I got a friend of mine, he won't even get behind the wheel of his car if he's much as had half a can of beer. He'll give the keys to someone or whatever, say, hey, take me home, I'll pick my car up in the morning or whatnot. No, But for the simple reason he doesn't know, half a can of beer. Oh yeah, I'm not drunk. But you've seen the commercials. It's called buzz driving and drunk driving. That's true. And my friend, he kind of wants to prevent things like that because you never know. And it's the same thing. You haven't gotten any sleep, go to bed for a couple hours. Whatever it is can wait. You can wait to go get your pack of cigarettes or whatever. It's not worth you going without sleep just to go up the road and get a pack of smoke because you don't know. Most accidents happen close to home, as in this case. But on that note, I hope you all stay well. We got some nice holiday season coming through here pretty soon. I thank you for listening today. And be sure to tune in to another broadcast of the Ellen Carrington Show on November 19th. It's the week before Thanksgiving. That's going to be fun. Thanks for listening once again. I hope you have a great day and a great 2 weeks. And I see you soon.